All right, so here we go. I feel like I could say strap your seatbelt on, but I don't know. You'll tell me after the class.
Why is it going to be what?
No, just, so many things debunked. How about that? I don't know. That's what we'll say. All right, so we are going to begin with class number 2 from the Jewpernatural. This is about stars and signs. That is going to be on page number, first text will be
44.
44. Yeah, 43 and 44. So one of the things I think we all agree is there are so many things beyond our control. And because of that, we always want to feel grounded. So what do? We turn to people who hopefully have some sort of an insight. What's my future going to look like? How is my family going to look in 5 years? How am I going to look in 10 years? What's life going to look like? And the way that many people do that has been in the past through astrology, by going to people who read their tarot cards. Tarot, thank you. You see, there I go. It's clear that I do not go to that. But thank you.
But you're not allowed to really.
Well, I don't know. I'll find out at the end of the class. So today, really, we are going to get into the Jewish perspective on that, on astrology. And besides for that, of course, part of the question is, what can we learn from it? Which is always, I think, the most important thing, a practical piece of advice for us, that within the conversation, what is the Jewish perspective, but also what is the perspective that can teach us about life in general. And that's what I always appreciate. So the thing is what I've realized is that science is obviously very predominant and dominant, if I can use that, in this world. And so we look at many things, and that might also steer people away from astrology and all of the other methods that people look to the future. But at the same time, I'm just going to read something that I printed off the internet. I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has really kind of steered people back to, like, what is the future? What's this world coming to? Is it to hell in a handbasket, or is there something better in the future? And that uncertainty is why it has steered people maybe who had drifted away from these types of futuristic perspectives. They have come back in popularity just a bit. So I just want to share my horoscope. This is straight off of horoscopes.com. I felt so good today. I just want you to know.
Hebrew or the English?
I used,
Birthday.
well, I think mine is the same. So
Oh, all right.
it is not
Oh,
fake.
it is?
Yeah. Why do I know that? That's another question.
Okay.
But here's my horoscope. I am a Libra, for those of you who are curious. I am not a Scorpio. Then I could say I'm a skeptic about all of this. So I can't throw that joke here. Today, you might find yourself at a loss as to how to proceed with a particular task or project in which you are involved. There might be a number of options to you, all workable, and this could prove confusing. If all options are efficient and practical, don't agonize over your decision. That must be a Libra thing, to always be indecisive. So they have very practical advice. Flip a coin. Success is strongly indicated if you don't stress yourself out in the process. So that was today's horoscope. And then I want to just understand, okay, how do they talk about Libra? So this is Libra star dates and traits. Known for their diplomacy and harmonious energy. I'm patting myself on the back. Libra is one of the most laid-back members of the zodiac. They are extremely relationship-oriented, but can sometimes prioritize their partner's needs over their own. This Venus-ruled sign has a keen eye for aesthetics with impeccable personal style and well-decorated homes, which I blame on my wife. So that's not, we're different. She's born in April. By raise of hands, I'm just curious, how many of you here believe in horoscopes, or kind of read your daily horoscope, or have some sort of a belief within it?
Can I just say something?
Of course.
If you
Well,
don't-
first of all, let me get the hands up, and then we're going to take your question.
To me,
Why
you're
isn't
asking-
your hand? I know you
Because
well
I don't
enough.
read it daily.
Okay, not daily. Do you believe in it?
100%.
Okay, that's
How many hands went up?
I think she's misinterpreting the question. Let's ask the question again. Do you have any sort of belief within this construct?
Only of the good ones.
Only of the good ones.
Are you saying
Okay,
you
I would
believe
say
in
this.
astrology?
Yeah, astrology.
Okay.
or psychics and all the other people.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think I think you guys are above the national average. I just want if we took this room, yeah.
So, when it comes to astrology, I mean, if you go to an astrologer, I mean, then they wanna know the date you're
Born.
born and all, where you were born and all that, and then we have your rising sign and then this. So I think that's more accurate than just,
Oh, you're saying for me, for my specific one. Okay, you're concerned that I'm getting bad advice here. Got you.
without knowing your birth date.
I
think
get it.
that's
Okay, I
wrong.
appreciate you looking out for me. I shouldn't get too complacent here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, there are Kabbalistic astrologers out there in the world.
Okay,
You
so
can go to.
we'll tap into.
I'm telling you.
She's agreeing. She's reiterating what you're saying.
Oh,
You
yeah,
need it,
because
you
I've
need
been
all
there.
that.
You got to get down to the detail. I get it.
Yes.
So you're saying this is worthless? I shouldn't
I mean, I wouldn't put anything.
really? By the way, I really am on the. Just to answer that, am I a true Libra or not? Great question. I know I'm October 21, which means that October 23 is already Scorpio, so there's got to be a blend, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Someone here can start telling me. Oh, there we go. We got an expert. So again, though, I'm gonna use the.
And most of us, if we go by the Hebrew date, it's a different date. a
Okay,
different Mazel.
but by the way, it
And if
doesn't
we go
change
by
the
English
question.
date, it's a different
I get
Mazel.
that. It doesn't change the question if we go by the Hebrew or by the English or what did I go by. In the end of the day, Tishrei is Libra, so it wouldn't make a difference for me. But I understand what you're saying. Like I shouldn't worry about this paper, but in general, the question still remains. It seems like many of you here really do take it seriously. Like if somebody read something to you about your day, future, whatever, based on astrology or other methods, it would be take it seriously.
Not all of us there.
I said a lot, but I want you to know, like, I think I saw that for age group of 65 and older, it should only be 21%. This room was over 50%. Just putting that out there. It said, well, I'm going to put on the screen. Here is the belief in astrology among US adults. All right. So in general, 29%. It is on the rise, though. This is based off of a 2018 study. All right. Before COVID. Exactly. I think now they said 32%. So 18 to 29, 32%. Maybe I just read that and, you know, the demon imagination turned on. But 18 to 29, 32% believe in astrology. If you are between the ages of 30 to 49, you have 34%. 50 to 64, you start becoming a skeptic, clearly. 27%. And 65 and older, 21%. So clearly, it's not just, this is something that I've noticed, not because I went to horoscopes.com. I am on social media just a bit. And there are channels on YouTube, there are Instagram pages that are dedicated to the daily horoscope and how you can become better based off of that. Use the inspiration of the daily message or signs. I should probably use that word instead. And so the question is, what does Judaism have to say about this? Are they a place, I'm going to say astrology and constellations and the zodiac signs, are they a place that we should look to for human insights, for human nature, information about the future? Should we draw any guidance from it? And so we're going to use the lesson video that gives a little bit more information about, and I think it seems like some of you are very well educated on this, more than just the horoscope, but even talking about the hour, the minutes. So hopefully this will bring some insight for some of you as well. But for the rest of us, I learned from this video.
What is Judaism's position on astrology? To answer that, a little intro is in order. Astrology is the belief that each celestial item that makes up the furniture of our skies has a direct influence in one way or another on planet Earth and its human population. Now, there's a lot going on up there, but as far as astrology is concerned, we can group it all into two categories. Of all the countless stars, astrologers are fascinated by 12 specific clusters or constellations. If we draw imaginary lines in the sky, like a child drawing dot to dot, these clusters turn into simplified images. Why are these clusters meaningful to astrologers? Because they belong to a region of the sky that is directly in the path that the sun takes during the course of a year. If we imagine the sun to be a giant pointer, it draws attention to a different constellation each month. So nature itself appears to highlight the importance of specific clusters at specific times. Astrology refers to the constellations as zodiac signs, and the region of sky they occupy as the zodiac belt. Beside the stars, which occupy fixed positions, there are also celestial bodies that move through our skies and are said to wield influence. 7 of them are close or bright enough to be visible to the human eye, and were therefore known to the ancients, who treated them as a complete set. Now, the exact positions of the constellations and planets is highly significant to astrology in at least 3 ways. 1. Birth. This is a one-time calculation. The astrological reading at the moment of your birth says a lot about your personality and life. 2. Events. This is a relationship between the stars and planets and large-scale events on planet Earth. Wars, wealth, tsunamis, famines. 3. Activity. This is a way to determine which activities are likely to be successful based on their timing. Certain astrological signs suggest that beginning a specific activity at that time is highly advisable, while to begin other specific actions would be disastrous. So, where does Judaism stand on all this? Well, for a start, Judaism insists that God directs the world. The stars and planets do not. Does that belief sabotage astrology? A look inside Judaism's classic sources reveals conflicting opinions. Some, like the famous Maimonides, insist that the stars and planets are perfect for configuring a precise calendar, but nothing more. Others argue that God created these features of our universe to serve as useful tools. They do have an influence on us to an extent directed by God. Several classic Jewish sources deal with astrology, but today we'll take a look at the Talmud. The Talmudic sages used the Hebrew term Mazelot, which means flow or travel, because the planets journey through our skies. And they discussed 3 astrological time periods: hours, days, and months. The monthly Mazelot are the zodiac signs that alternate on a monthly basis. But here's a catch. Jewish months are lunar-based and fit a unique Torah system of astronomical calculations. So don't expect the monthly Mazelot to perfectly match the common zodiac system. But the monthly zodiacs are very rarely mentioned in the Talmud, so the rabbis couldn't have considered them overly important. Instead, they paid close attention to the hourly Mazelot. How do those work? Divide each day into 12 equal hours and each night into another 12. Each hour of the day and night is influenced by another of the big 7. Begin with the first hour of Saturday night. Put Mercury in that slot. For the second hour, add the moon. The third hour belongs to Saturn, then Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, and the 7th hour is Venus. For the 8th hour, begin the pattern again. In goes Mercury. And we keep up the same pattern all week long. It fits perfectly, so we always start again with Mercury at the first hour of Saturday night. Now, in addition to the planets rotating their rule on an hourly basis, there is also the concept of daily Mazelot. For this, we must view the day and the night as 2 distinct units of time. We then identify one dominant Mazel for the 12 daytime hours, and another dominant Mazel for the 12 night hours. Let's take Tuesday as an example. Which planet dominates the first hour of the day? That would be Mars. So Mars is the major player for that entire 12-hour period, while the others are minor players. But when night falls on Tuesday, Mars steps down from its throne. Which planet takes its place? Saturn sits at the first hour of each Tuesday night. So Saturn becomes the primary influencer throughout that night. That's how the daily Mazelot works. But as mentioned earlier, the Talmudic sages focused mainly on the hourly Mazelot. For example, if you wanted to discover something about your natural personality, you would identify the precise hour of your birth and take note of its dominant Mazel, which lends a whole new meaning to our responding to a birth with Mazel Tov.
I didn't make the video, but I'll tell them.
Yeah.
I could probably also lower the volume a little bit. So really, this is basically the basic definition. I saw that some of you did know this. I actually will share that I checked afterwards my Hebrew one by the hour. I still like it. I'm just putting that out there. But on page 45, just to share again, there were three kind of general ideas of the three different ways that people look at astrology. One is natal. That is basically the positions of the planets and the zodiacal signs that are specific to when a person was born. Then you have the general, which is the astrological circumstances, staging world events. And then lastly, you have cathartic, and that is specifically to moments that affect your life. Like, should I start building this day? Should I avoid that day when I build? Things like that. Favorable times. I think that when you look at Haman, for example, which maybe we'll touch him a little bit later, he looked for a specific time to kill the Jews, right? He was looking for a more favorable time. I will touch that actually a bit later. But these are the three basic premises, or I should say the three basic categories of astrology. And so for us, the basic premise of astrology is that the stars of heaven wield influence, if I'm just going to dumb this down, over the world below them. And by studying the positions of the planets, the constellations, particular periods of time, we can learn about our personality, our destiny, predictions can be made about the future, and guidance can be taken from it for different particular courses of action for anything in our life. So what do you think is Judaism's stance on astrology, and why? And I know some of you said there are Kabbalistic inspired astrologists or readers, psychics, whatever you want to call them, which would mean that they're using Jewish teachings. Does that mean that it is something that Judaism encourages? Yes.
But Abraham Avinu was already an astrology at that time, you know, and we're going
Okay.
back, what, almost 4,000 years ago
Yeah.
or more?
So does that mean that Judaism approves of
No,
it?
I mean.
You're saying, you're just sharing that.
And
And actually, I will share, there's going to be
God
some,
actually told him to
look at the stars,
and
correct.
get to
Yeah,
the
this is a
end of
great
it.
quote, great quote. So, okay, so here we have not only that Judaism believes in it, but also some sort of like a proof. Anyone else want to share their thoughts on this? Maybe something you read, maybe something you've studied. Wow, a room with only one opinion.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
Well, you know, there's always an opinion before you learn the,
Well, I know, we
you're
have-
giving the other opinion? I love
We
this.
have Mazalot. If they wouldn't believe in it, it wouldn't be Mazalot. I mean, we call it, Mazal is luck.
No, I understand what you're saying.
So, you know.
Yeah, one sec, we'll get to you, Marcy, yeah.
My mother had the thing that she sketched that was the astrological signs that was from the floor, and I saw it in Israel. It was one of those synagogues that they dug up that was underneath the church that was very ancient, and the floor had the
signs.
symbol with all the astrological signs. It was very
Interesting.
old.
So you're saying Judaism does believe in it?
Now, that group did.
It has to be.
Hopefully it was a synagogue, right?
Well, that was. a
I'm
synagogue.
joking, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marcy.
I happened to get an email today from Jewish Learning, and that was one of the things it talked about was astrology.
What did they
And
say?
it showed, I believe that's the synagogue that it showed. that the
By the way, I shouldn't have even asked the question. I realized before by raise of hands, most people believe in it. So I don't think I'm going to get a single opinion here that says it's not Jewish. Yeah,
In reading, it talks about that it goes against because we all have free will and.
oh, these are great. These are great additional points to ponder. So just to repeat that, if we have free will, then like, how does this play? How does that play into it? Can they kind of coexist? Yeah.
The Torah does make reference to, like, necromancers or whatever term you want to use, that they
Right.
don't do this. And I think particularly like in the exchanges between Moses and Pharaoh, there was this group of Pharaoh's guys who were star readers, and there was Moses who was extending God's governance over the court. So I think that in my mind, that was a prohibition against it. Don't do this. Now, the other thing is on Yom Kippur, where our destiny is inscribed into the book, but there's still opportunity to change that destiny. So
Right. I like that. These are very good points, by the way, which our class will touch. But just to go back to the Pharaoh thing for just a moment, I don't know that over there we can learn that Jews cannot do it. Right? We know that he had on staff.
Don't believe in it, or don't trust in it.
Don't trust in it. Doesn't mean we can't look at it. Right? There's a prohibition and there's a don't do. And so really the question is, how does this fit? Like, is it yeah, there's something to it, but don't do that. You've got your own thing, like you mentioned. Or is it, this is forbidden?
I
Yeah.
thought it was forbidden.
No, I don't want to spoil the class at the answer in the beginning. I'm just joking. No, these are very good points.
So, I thought that was really interesting what you showed, and I saw some science in it, and so that resonated with me a little bit. But I really think that, you don't go to astrology to make certain decisions, like a science, if you're given an opinion by somebody to, your doctor suggests this or this, you don't go to an astrologer for help.
Right.
I mean, like, so I think that.
So you're saying it's up to a certain point where people will use that.
To me, that was very scientific, and that was like relatively, cool, because I'm generally a non-believer because I'm more of a scientist. But I like that, and I saw some science there, but in this world, that if, like, I think you have to trust in science and trust in, things that are shown to be factual. And I think that sometimes people forget facts. And so, like, I just I can't believe in going to an astrologer to make certain decisions that should be more based on fact
Right.
than on astrology. I think that's.
Spoken like a true doctor. I should ask about homeopathic healing as well here. I'm just joking. That's not today's class. But no, I totally know what you mean. Like, you're saying that there's a lot to it. Maybe you can there is a science to it,
Yes.
but it's up to a certain point.
In my personal opinion,
Right. Which is important.
to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you want to add
I'm
something?
wondering if the Jewish take on it is that it can be used up to a point, like for determining dates and calendars, and since numerology plays into a lot of Jewish teachings, I wonder if maybe that's where astrology.
Okay, so this is a great question. I'll just repeat it, and then I know our class will not touch this, but the question was, we look at the signs, the stars, the moon, the orbit of the planets. In our class, we're talking about the study of it for kind of telling us how to live today. What is influencing my life? Why am I having such a bad whatever? And people are going to turn to that and say, oh, it's because of this. The question is, what about using all of these sciences I'm using the word science now, the science of the orbit of the planets. And again, just to throw what they said in the video, which was to throw everything off, we follow the moon. The zodiac was about where the sun aligns with it. But what about using that for the calendar, setting up the calendar, what day? And there is something to that, of course, but it's a totally different study, if you want to call it that. But you are correct. Like, when is a new month? The Jewish calendar that we have set up in the ancient times, not the way it is today, was based on somebody seeing the new moon. But the courts technically knew if they could have or not. There's a science to it. There's a math. And so they could have technically had two witnesses walk into the court and say, we just saw the new moon. And the rabbis who were studious in that would have said, that's impossible. But if they would have gone through every question that they were interviewed with and answered them, they would have had to go based on the two witnesses, which is a way that people messed up the system, if we're going to be honest.
Why do we have a prayer for the Levana? For the moon?
For the
We
moon.
have- Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
mean, there must be something there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a prayer for
okay.
it.
And it does say that the Jewish people are compared to the moon, it waxes and wanes. But again, that's not necessarily.
Because Levana, we do
Yeah,
it-
no, I'm saying that's part of the,
Yeah.
that's not going to be touching this class, and I'm going to try to get you a good answer for that. I don't have one for off the pulpit here, if I can say that. But it does say that a lot, it definitely has to do with what we're talking about. Like, where does our blessings come from? The moon is that representative of us. We need the moon for the world. We need the moon for the earth, because that's part of how everything grows. And,
Cycle.
yeah, so there's that too. But we don't pray to the moon, we pray for the moon. Do you know what I mean? I'm just using that because it's
Correct.
just putting that out there. So I think, just to kind of paraphrase what everyone's saying, is, I mean, there's a lot of, I feel, leaning that there's a lot to this. On the other hand, there's also those that say, hey, science is where I'll go to, but the signs, I can appreciate it a little bit, but I don't put too much faith in it. And so really that's how the Jewish sources are going to be as well, that you're going to find the sources that really talk about it, that really put some emphasis on it, talk about how they've affected something or an event. And then you're going to find those that say, like we were in the video, they already quoted Maimonides, who doesn't really let it stand too much in his life. And we'll read his text as well. So it has a broad appeal, but there are a lot of elements. And the question is, do we as Jews trust those elements? Should we put our faith in those elements or not? So we're going to jump into the Talmud. And like we mentioned actually on the screen earlier, the astrology focuses on three things: the month, the week, or really the day and the hour. And so for Jewish people, and I like that you immediately plugged that right when we started, was, hey, it's really about, you got to pinpoint it. We don't really care as much about the month as we do about the day or the hour itself. And so the truth is, when you look at the Talmudic text, it really barely touches the month. The only time, as far as I understood when I was studying this, that it really talks about the month is when it talks about Haman and him trying to figure out what month is a month that doesn't have a good omen for the Jewish people, because that's the month he's going to choose that the Jewish people will be killed. But really, the Talmud focuses on the hourly Mazel, the hourly more than anything else. So if you want to look on page 46, this was just that chart that you can see kind of, it spoke about the hours. This was really all in the video, but I did look for mine, and I found that I think I was righteous and something else. I mean, it was just good stuff. So, but again, this is really what we focus more about, the planet of that hour or of that day. And again, in the day, it's half day. So think about this like long-term or short-term parking at the airport. Are you paying by the day, by the hour? But again, that's just a chart for your reference. You can try to figure out by knowing when you were born, what day. Maybe you can find out more of the Jewish Mazel, the Jewish horoscope that really would be yours. So again, every half hour of the day, just to recap what that video said, is associated with one of 7 celestial bodies. We call it the planets. And starting from the first hour of Saturday night, the cycle follows the order of Mercury, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the sun, and Venus. And basically, that is fixed. So it's going to constantly keep cycling through that. And again, if you want to know what is the ruling body of the day, you look at the one that was at the first hour. So I'm just quickly recapping that. And then again, if you want to know what is the destiny of each, that is on the second page. That is the second page. That's Rabbi Hanina's destiny chart. So now yeah, sure.
I'm confused. I'm trying to figure out
You want to know what yours is?
I was trying to figure it out, but I can't, so I think we're all trying to figure out what ours are, but I'm a little.
It's funny, I don't,
With that.
I have to charge for that.
I would have to, pay for it.
No, but honestly, which one are you looking for? I'll try to help you
It
quickly.
doesn't say.
Well, like the day of my is.
It doesn't go by the month. It goes, just look at only at the day of the week.
The day, I know the day.
Let's say I was born on a Sunday.
Sunday.
So let's say you're born on Sunday at 8 a.m.
Let me see.
Well, it's 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
Okay.
So you are the moon.
Okay.
At least mine doesn't have color. Hopefully yours does.
Moon and not the sun. Like, because the hour.
Yeah, you gotta look at the hour on the left.
But where is the eight?
Which one?
Oh, so the day of the week, not the number of the.
Correct,
day.
correct.
Day of week.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Gotcha.
But don't work too hard. I'm sure there's somebody you can pay in California for this.
Yeah.
I don't think we have this in Phoenix. Anyone know? Share the contact afterwards. I'm just joking. Well, maybe at the end of the class, we're all gonna be lining up for this. I don't know. But let's jump into the Talmud to actually see how this was put into practice. And we're going to look at something that actually is Passover story. So I think we're all familiar with it. The question is if we all know the details of it. But one of the things that we know about the Egyptians and one of the decrees that Pharaoh had on the Jewish people was he threw all the babies into the Nile to kill them. The question was, why? And so we're going to jump into text 1a, and we're going to start with Allison in the back, if you'd like. If not, you'll pass the buck. But again, while you're, if you are reading, please share your name. So again, page 48, text 1a.
Allison. Pharaoh's decree. Pharaoh gave order to all his people, every boy that is born must be cast into the Nile, but let every girl live.
So again, this was obviously connected to a number of things, but one of them was the Jewish birth rate was astronomical. And it was just so many Jewish children were being born. I know, no pun intended. Thank you for getting it. But this is really not specifically about that, but this is specifically about something else, which we're going to read in just a moment. But he doesn't specify the Jewish children. If you look back at that verse, it says Pharaoh gave an order to all his people. And it does not say every Jewish boy. Now, there are commentaries that say he was telling his people to help kill the Jewish boys. But if we just took it for its face value, this does not say the Jewish children. And so we'll jump into 1b, Marty.
Good morning. Pharaoh made this decree on his own people as well. He did so because on the day Moses was born, the astrologers told him, the Savior of the Jewish people was born today. We don't know if this person is a Jew or an Egyptian. We do see, however, that his eventual downfall will be through water. Pharaoh therefore made a decree that every day it's only born boys, including the Egyptians.
So, I mean, this is pretty wild, right? The astrologers were able to predict the rise of a potential savior for the Jewish people. And they knew what day it was. So not only that there's going to be someone who's going to save them, take all the Jews out of Egypt, he's going to be born on the 7th day of Adar. I'm just using that date. That's actually his birthday. And they also saw that his downfall would be water. So what is the kryptonite? Throw them into the Nile. Any Jewish boy, they didn't know who, but water is going to be the way to stop this. And not only that, they also knew when he was in the water. That's when the decree stopped. Little did they know this kid was raised in Pharaoh's palace, right? So again, I know that Yona already quoted how Abraham had a very big knowledge of astrology and used it. Here, if you want to look at page 50, I am going to just highlight through some of these. You can, of course, read them on your own. But the first one was that Abraham is told he's going to have a child, and that child is going to be the progeny. This is where the Jewish people are going to come from. Abraham tells God, he says, wait a second. I already saw in my stars that I have no more children coming my way. So how could that be? So what does God tell him? I'm just quoting this. He says, are you concerned because Jupiter is in the west? I'll move Jupiter to the east, right? I can change it. I'm God. The next thing is, it says that after Sarah dies, Abraham remarries, and he marries a woman. Her name is Keturah. Keturah has many children, but again, the Jewish people are coming from Isaac. And so he gives them gifts. What are the gifts? One of the commentaries, this is in a Medrash, says that they were thorough knowledge of astrology. So that's number 2. Then you have Abraham the astrologer. It says, God blessed him with everything. And again, you can read these more in depth. I'm just highlighting them. It says that people would come to him just asking for advice. Tell me what's my future? What should I do here? This is because he had all the knowledge. He was the man. It doesn't say if he charged. Then you have, this is a more fascinating story that I feel like some of my kids know. So Joseph is sold as a slave, ends up in Egypt. He ends up in the home of Potiphar. The famous story, how he ends up in prison, is because she tries to seduce him. He finally refuses the attempts on a holiday, if you want to call it that. And so the woman of the house, Potiphar, still has his clothing. And so she tells her husband, look, he tried to rape me. He ends up in prison. And this is kind of the story of where eventually he interprets dreams and slowly meets Pharaoh and interprets Pharaoh's dreams. So we're kind of connecting to last week. But why did she want to have this relationship with a slave? Right? The Egyptians did not look at the Jews in a positive way. Bless you. And so one of the reasons that we are taught is because she had seen in the stars that she was destined to have descendants from Joseph. However, the stars didn't tell her it wasn't going to be Joseph with her. It was going to be through her daughter. Eventually, her daughter marries Joseph. And again, if you keep looking, the Jewish people, that's what it says. Osnat bat Potiphera. There we go. And again, you keep looking through some of these stories. Again, I'll just highlight some of them. You talk about a very fascinating thing. The Jewish people sin. They make the golden calf. And God wants to kill the Jewish people. He says, I'm going to make a new nation from you, Moses, from your family. So what does Moses do? He fights for the Jewish people to survive, to exist. And one of the arguments that he uses based off of this commentary in Exodus is that he told Pharaoh had said that the Jewish people would die. Ra'ah was going to be the way that they would die in the desert. And Moses said, if this happens, then Pharaoh's going to say, I was right. Look, my prediction of the astrologers was correct. So that was one of his arguments to God to save the Jewish people. Then you go a little bit further. You have, I actually found this one fascinating. I had not learned this commentary before. The first nation that attacks the Jewish people is Amalek. We know them as the villains of the Jewish people, right? This is the only nation that God says to destroy. And so what is the story? It says they wage war and they use special soldiers. They use the power of astrology to know who is not destined to die this year. So how do the Jewish people counteract that? It says that Moses tells Joshua to choose men. And this commentary says, what is he choosing men? With similar astrological destinies that are not going to die this year. I found that one quite fascinating.
Wow, so they use that for everything.
So, right, if we're looking at these texts, clearly we see a very strong pattern of using astrology and the study of it in practical living, not just like an idea. And again, you can look at the King Solomon one. I love that story too. This one I had learned in school in my days. Solomon asks, he's going to build the temple. He asks the Pharaoh of Egypt for help. He needs laborers. So the Pharaoh of Egypt says, no problem, I'll send laborers. And he finds people that are all destined to die that year. Solomon's a wise man. We call him the wisest man. What does he do? He sees what this joke is about. So he sends them all back to Egypt with shrouds. And he says, what, you don't have enough shrouds? Right, so that's that second to last one. And then the last one is the story of Haman, where he goes through every single planet, every single month. He's using the month system. And every single one has something positive about the Jewish people until he finds the month of Adar, which you couldn't find anything positive. If you look through the text, you can see how each one is kind of associated with something positive. So clearly, if we were just using all of these texts, as well as the source that we use from the Chumash, from the story of Pharaoh, we would come to a conclusive conclusion that we totally should take this serious. If somebody came to you and gave you your prediction for the day, the month, whatever it is, there's a lot to listen to. Yes.
So let's take a month, because Purim is coming up, right? So he decided on the 13th, because he saw it in the stars, right?
He first first he just chose the month, then he did a lottery for the rest.
So
Four.
the lottery was part of,
Finding this month for Purim.
but not looking at the stars, just the lottery.
Correct. Like if you say the 13th of the month or the 14th. First he chose a month. This was the month that worked well. Then what day?
Okay. So, but it didn't work out for him because.
Clearly, because Moses was born in that month. And so we had a positive omen that he overlooked. That's what it was. Right? So he took it so seriously. No, well,
Did not.
That's also true, but it says that when you talk about this aspect of like him thinking the month was good, he didn't realize that Moshe, our leader, was born in that month. So it has to have a positive month. I will share something interesting, by the way, when you talk about Jewish astrological leanings, it does say that if you have a court case, you should push it to that month, right? It's the only time you find month. So I don't know, month of Adar, because it's a very lucky month for the Jewish people. Yeah.
What month is that?
That is Adar. So that is this year, March. Oh, you're checking? Thank you. It's March, but again, it's the Jewish one, so it can kind of, this year we have you get 2 good months. 2 good months this year.
So when Moshe was born, the first Adar Aleph.
Well, yeah, that year was probably not a leap year, but it doesn't make a difference. The month is a good month, even in a leap year, which gives you 2 months, 60 days of good omen. All right, so coming back to this, it would clearly appear that the Talmudic texts and everything that we've read show that we really should take this seriously, and maybe even an absolute belief. But that causes a theological problem. What is the theological problem? In order to accept astrology as a Jewish belief, we have to just make sure we understand something. Any decision-making that we give to the stars is idolatry. If we're saying it's not God, then it's idolatry. In fact, so much so, I'm just going to use this on the screen. In Hebrew, when we use text that we talk about idolatry, this is the acronym that they'll use. And what it stands for is, I'm going to read it from here, Ovdei Kochavim Umazalot, which Ovdei, those who serve or worship the stars and the Mazalot, the Mazels. So clearly the stars can't be something that influences earthly events, because that would be worshiping idols. So how do we understand that? How do we kind of find the middle ground? So one way that we talk about it is it's natural forces. I'm going to share both of these on the screen, but I'll clarify. So one way is God gave these planets, these zodiac signs, as ways to know a certain nature of somebody born during that time. So for example, we know that fire burns. If there is a fire in a home, it's going to burn the home. The same thing is if a person is born at a certain hour, and one of the hours that we give, Mars, for example, has a nature to be a murderous person. That's one of the Jewish teachings about Mars. So if you are from Mars, no, but if you are in effect affected by Mars, you have a nature towards murder. But again,
How do we know that?
oh, that's, we got to talk to the people. This is what it says. This is what the Talmud teaches. This is what those who know the signs teach. So, but the point here is, it's just natural force. It's not something that the star didn't do anything to you. If you were born during that time, your nature is murderous. Just like fire burns, it doesn't do anything to make you do that.
You don't have to act.
Correct, correct. It doesn't mean that you will be a murderer. You want to add something, Kana?
No, I was just gonna say, I always get very confused with this whole thing because when there are twins and they're born a few minutes apart, what happens to them? I mean, they don't both end up being the same type of person. And the other thing I was just gonna say that in Israel, a lot of people get married on Tuesday.
Right, you know why?
So that has something to do with astrology.
No, that has to do with the Torah. So Tuesday is a day that in creation it said this, every single day of creation, God said, Vayhi erev, vayhi boker, yom echad, yom sheni, but he also said he saw that his work was good. On Tuesday, he said that twice. So they say in Hebrew, Yom shehuchpal bo kitov. It's the day that they doubled that it was good. So people look at it as a positive moment. I think I also got married on a Tuesday. Just putting that out there.
So what about every home?
Okay.
The first part of it. So two people were born.
They're born at different times.
Everything.
No, they're born at different times.
No, but.
She's saying even by the minute, they could be different.
No,
That's what.
but, okay,
That's
let's
what
say
I'm
it's, I don't know, 5 million people. So out of 5 million people.
Technically,
there's 2 babies that are born.
so hold on. If we're gonna ask that question, we have to go back to horoscope questions. Same thing. Like, how could this paper mean anything? I'm different than the next person who's born at the same time. But if they were born at the same minute, technically what everyone here who does believe in it is saying we would have the same horoscope. Right? Again, if I was 3 hours earlier or later, a different story.
But it depends on where you were born also.
So
If
meaning
you're
what?
born in Brooklyn compared to Miami.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying. You're saying because of the hour, I get it. Right, that's a 2 o'clock, I'm a 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock. But let's say both in Arizona.
Different.
Let's talk about both in Arizona.
That's right.
Different angle of how the light shines on that zodiac. I get what you're saying.
And Brooklyn is a special place.
And there you go. Brooklyn has its own qualities. Got it. Yes, go for it.
Typical, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but the fact that it's referred to as Mazel, Mazel is good, lucky. So it's already in the name because Hebrew.
Okay, hold on. You are touching something that we will kind of
Okay.
address, but to share the answer is today what we say with Mazel Tov could mean something different than what it was originally meant to mean. Which we'll touch. We will touch
Okay.
that. But coming back to this first one, the first one is that the actual signs don't have any power. God gave them the power. And if you're born during that time, that's going to be your nature. The other way that we can look at it is that the heavenly bodies serve as indicators of what form of divine expression is dominant. So it's not like fire that causes objects to burn, but it's rather like a watch that indicates the time without causing the morning or the evening to arrive. So in the end of the day, the outcome is the same. The person born at a certain time is going to have a specific nature. But there's also the same outcome that neither of them, according to this way that we're explaining it, have decision-making power. You look at it to know the nature of the person or of the time or of the event, but we don't have a reason to worship them. They don't have power on their own. And so even with the idea or problem of idolatry off the table now, right? We're not looking at them to worship them. They don't have their own power. There are still other issues that we have. And one of them was brought up earlier. I think it was Izzy or someone else who mentioned about free will, free choice, the freedom to choose. So technically, if we were to go back to astrology, there are still issues with Jewish beliefs. Number one is we believe that you have the freedom to choose. Number two, if I was forced into something, if this was indicated and determined what I was going to do, then what is the point of reward and punishment? It would make no sense to have reward and punishment because that was determined. It was my destiny. I couldn't change it. And number three, why would we need prophecy? If I could look at the stars and the moons and the sun and know what's the future, what's the point of prophecy? And so for that reason, Maimonides, which is one of the texts that we're going to jump into in just a moment, says that the first two problems, the first one, freedom of choice and reward and punishments, that is truly a problem to believe in astrology, and therefore he doesn't like astrology. So we'll read text number 2. Jody, we're going to jump to you. Page 55 for text 2.
Choice is famous female.
Yeah, I use it interchangeably.
Oh, so the same.
Yeah,
What do you use in
free will or free choice.
Oh,
All right, so text number 2.
Do not entertain a thesis held by foolish people that God decrees at the time of a person's creation, whether he or she will be righteous or wicked. If God were to decree that an individual will be righteous or wicked, or that there will be an insurmountable inborn quality that compels a person to a particular behavior, way of thinking, attributes, or deeds, as the foolish proponents of astrology imagine, how could he command us, do this, do not do this, improve your behavior, or do not follow after your wickedness? According to their mistaken conception, it has already been decreed or predetermined by the person's insurmountable nature that he or she must act in a certain way. In addition, were this to be true, what room would there be for the entire Torah? By what standard of justice would retribution be administered to the wicked or reward granted to the righteous? Shall the judge of the entire world not act justly?
So he highlights 2 things in this text. Number 1 is freedom of choice. If the Torah is a book of instruction, right? That is, Torah comes from the word hora'ah, to teach, to instruct. If the Torah is there to instruct us on how to live life, how would it make sense if human nature was already predetermined? That, like we mentioned, Mars, that is somebody who will be a murderous person. There's no way that that person would have the choice to be a righteous person. It was predetermined. And the same thing is, if Jupiter is a sign of justice, righteousness, then that person never had a choice to be wicked, which we need, right? We need you to have these choices. So without the freedom of choice, without free will, to use that word, there's no room for the Torah. What's the point in telling us what to do, what not to do, how to live a meaningful life? It's all been predetermined. And the second thing that he talks about is reward and punishment, which is on the same, just continuing that conversation. He's like, if everything has been predestined and predetermined, then what's the point in a reward? A guy who shows up late to class and said, hey, it was today my horoscope made me late. So no teacher could be upset. And the same thing is if we talk about wealth, poverty, right? These are less of the moral stuff. But if you talk about wealth, poverty, other life circumstances, they're all predetermined. Then how does God reward and punish based on those ideas as well? Oh, you did well, etc. So the Jewish belief is clearly that our future is dependent, as we mentioned last week as well, on prayer, good deeds, but not by astrology. So those are the 2 things that Maimonides mentioned. Here is the third thing, which is prophecy. And this will jump into text 3. English though, Hannah.
Okay. It is fundamental belief in the Jewish faith that God grants prophecy to humans. Free choice, the Jewish theological challenges to astrology. Free choice. If everything is predetermined, there's hard astrological.
Oh, hold on. We'll do that together. You're looking at figure 2-3, right?
Yeah.
All right. So before you touch that, hold on. So the first thing that Maimonides shares, which is what you read in that brief text, was it is a fundamental Jewish belief. Maimonides has, and he codifies, I think, 13 principles of faith, things that Jews believe. One of them is we believe that God grants prophecy to human beings. Why do we need that if we have astrology? Right? We have a God that said, or a Jewish belief that says, there is a communication between God and human beings through prophets. Our Torah is filled with that. We even have a book called the Book of Prophets. So why would we need that? If you can actually tell the future without the prophets, who needs them? How unique is prophecy? Why would this be a principle of our belief? So to summarize, again, the challenges to astrology, I'm using the screen. You can use your book as well. If everything is predetermined, what meaning is there to the Torah's commandments for us? Where's our choice? I can't choose anyways. And the Torah is there with laws. Do this, don't do that. All the stuff that we either love or hate. Number two, where's the purpose of reward and punishment? How does it even play out? One of the things that I always remember in Argentina, they had a cycle of, we have a cycle of study of Maimonides' Torah, Maimonides' text. And one of the things that the rabbi then spoke was exactly this principle. And it's in the wrong place in Maimonides. That's how he brought it up. Maimonides is a book of laws. It's not stories. It's not ideas. It's not principles of faith. There is a text. He has a chapter for that. But in the laws of repentance, he goes off on a tangent and talks about free will and choice. And the rabbi who was then speaking was sharing exactly this message. He says, you cannot believe in repentance if you never believed that you had no choice, or if you never believed you had a choice, I should say, in your action. And one of I went to a conference. I hated this presentation, but I walked away with one thing. It was a life coach. So if anyone here is a life coach, it's nothing against you. But I did take away one thing. And that was, I was just being polite and not walking out early. But I walked away with one message that sits with me. It's over 15 years, I think, that I've heard this message. And that was, the only way to change is if you first accept responsibility. It's this exact message. I have to believe that I did something wrong to correct it. But if everything was predetermined, then I don't have to do I can't do anything. Mm-hmm. So that's number two. And then number three was, why would God send us prophets if we have astrology? And there's so many people who read this. So those are good questions. Yes.
Oh, the prophecy that in going back to what you were talking about with you're associated with Mars or Venus or whatever, and you highlighted that Mars was you had a propensity to kill. Just thinking that wouldn't it be interesting to interview shachats, find out if there was commonality in when they were born, because they kill for a living.
Okay, just to rephrase it.
Is that crazy?
It does say that somebody who's born in the Mars, I'm going to say hour, because they have a murderous tendency, tendency for blood, they should become a surgeon, a chauffeur. That does say that.
I'm not saying, yes, a tendency for blood.
Oh,
Those professions would, what's the commonality?
I hear you. It's a good question.
Between when they were born.
All right, so we're going to jump back. Yeah.
I just wanted to understand why prophecy and astrology are grouped together. I mean, astrology is you're viewing the stars, you're interpreting them. Prophecy is where God talks to you. Right. Here's what you're going to say.
Well, I think it's more about they're looking at the future part where prophecy prophesizes, and you could use astrology for that. So jumping back in, if we're going to have a Jewish belief in astrology, it has to have some qualifications that align with these Jewish beliefs. And so we're going to go into the idea of natal astrology, which we said is if you were born at a certain time, you have a predetermined nature to do something good or bad. So let's talk about this text on page number 4. Izzy, if you'd like to read it.
Page what?
Sorry, text 4, page 57. Thank you.
Izzy out.
No, Izzy, thank you. English, please.
According to astrological predictions concerning promiscuity, theft, and the like, celestial bodies only generate an inclination and desire. Such people have a strong attraction to theft and promiscuity, that they can restrain themselves and overcome their inclination. This is like the standard negative inclination that we all deal with. Sometimes it entices us strongly. We can overpower it. The celestial bodies can only cause attraction, increasing the strength of the negative inclination. God has given us, like He has given such people the requisite strength to overpower this inclination. People who must struggle mightily to overcome their negative inclination as a result of astrological circumstances are granted greater reward by God for doing so than people who do not feel so strongly tempted. In summary, all that celestial bodies are able to determine, according to those who believe in their power, is a desire that we can overcome.
Okay, so number one, it's just an inclination. Number two, you're given extra strength for it. And number three, a greater reward. So that is his way of explaining. These are not things that determine anything. They are an inclination. Now, right now we talked about moral things. What about the idea where someone will be rich or poor? How does that play into this? Where it has nothing to do with choice. Yeah.
What about the time of this, the Holocaust?
Okay, so that's not, I don't have an answer for that, first of all. But I don't even know if I've ever seen a text on that. Did you have a question, Jeff? All right, so what was that? Pondering. All right, so the question is, how does astrology now come into this idea of not just on the moral choices, but shaping our material circumstances, to be wealthy, to be poor? And so this, we're going to jump into text 5a. Pinky, if you...
I think that whether you're gonna be poor or rich has a lot to do with your parents.
Yeah, that's probably also true, but what happens winning the lottery and other stuff? But Pinky, did you want to pass that on? All right, Dave, you're going to do that. Page 59, text 5a.
Rabbi Akiva had a daughter. Astrologers told him that she would be bitten by a snake on her wedding day and died. Rabbi Akiva was very worried about this. On the young lady's wedding day, she took the ornamental pin from her hair and stuck it into a hole in the wall for safekeeping. When she did so, it lodged into the eye of a snake, killing it, and in the morning, when she pulled out the pin of the wall, that dead snake followed, attached to the pin. Rabbi Akiva asked his daughter, "What did you do to merit this?" She told him. In the afternoon, a porter knocked on the door, but everyone was preoccupied with the wedding feast, and nobody heard him. I stood up, took my portion of food, and gave it to him. Rabbi Akiva said to her, "You performed a mitzvah, and you were saved in its merit." Rabbi Akiva went out and taught regarding this incident. Charity will save us from death.
So clearly, he accepts the validity of astrology, and he was very worried about his daughter. But then at the same time, the destiny was not final. Why? Because an act of charity aborted it. So again, this goes back to this idea that you can have something that is destined, quote unquote, but with your acts of charity, with a mitzvah, you can change that destiny. And the commentary over there summarizes this with text 5b. Jeff, we'll jump to you. Probably.
Through prayer and meritorious acts, one's astrological destiny can be changed.
So again, the God factor. God is the real power of this universe. And yes, there are things that can predict things, but there is an override feature. So prayer and meritorious conduct can override an astrological destiny. It can inform us. Astrology can inform us. But in the end of the day, in the realm of morality, we said we can override it with our free choice. And when we talk about material events, God has the ability to override it through our actions of Torah and mitzvot. Now, what about prophecy? So the first thing that we talked about was the story of Moses, the baby, and it predicted the future, if you think about it. But it fell short. And here is where we will see where it fell short. So text number 6, Holly, if you'd like. All right, so Deb.
Astrologers chirp. They do not understand what they are chirping. They mutter. They do not understand what they are muttering. Pharaoh's astrologers saw in the star that the savior of the Jewish people would be condemned by water, but they made a decree that all male children must be cast into the Nile. After Moses had been placed in the river by his mother safely protected in the basket, the astrologers said the Jewish savior has already been cast into the water and Pharaoh revoked the decree. What the astrologers did not know is that the water that would condemn Moses was the episode of the waters of the.
Yeah. Mariva, waters of Mariva. So clearly what we're saying is astrology is good up to a certain point. It had a lot of good information, but it was like looking through a fuzzy lens. It knew that a baby was going to be born. It wasn't sure if it was Jewish or not Jewish. It knew that the downfall would be through water, but it couldn't tell that just putting him in a basket was actually not in the water. He wasn't drowned. That's number one. And he didn't realize that it was about striking the rock later in the desert to bring out water. They just saw water. So they weren't seeing the entire picture. So I think prophecy is quite safe, as they say, because in the end of the day, it's much better. It's much more accurate. Let's put it that way. Just a side note, they say, sorry. Any prophecy that has a positive message is always going to be true. If it has a negative message, it can be changed. Exactly.
How did you ever knew, I mean, it was maybe an intuition for her, but how did she look in the stars?
Okay, you have a great question. So the brother of Moses puts her in a basket on the river. Is she doing it because of some astrological knowledge the water is going to do that? The actual truth is no, she was hiding him. The way it worked in Egypt, at least what the commentaries say, is the Egyptians kept track of pregnant moms. And they said, oh, your baby will be born 9 months later. We're going to start looking for a baby. Moses was born 7 months. And so 2 months later, they began to look, where is this baby? And so she had to hide him. That's what we're always taught. But it's a good question. I wonder if there's a commentary that shares that idea. And again, the last thing is that God tweaks the future, right? So we're not limited to nature, stars, or anything else. Prophecy is divine sourced. Astrology can be changed even if you saw that message. So again, to square up astrology with Jewish theology, we had a problem of free choice. We had a problem of reward and punishment. This is on page 62. And we had a problem with prophecy. The problem with free choice, we said was very simple. How could you, if it's predetermined, where's my choice? And so the answer was, it is only an inclination, right? The zodiac sign is only an inclination, but at the end of the day, you choose how you will act. Number two was reward and punishment. What point is there a reward or a punishment if it was all destined, it was all predetermined? And the answer was our prayer, our mitzvot, those actions can override it. And number three was prophecy. We don't need prophecy if the future can be read through astrology. And the answer to that was God is the only one that has the direct message and clarity, whereas astrology is blurry. It doesn't have all of that. So now we can call this astrology kind of minus, which is how this text will call it. It's astrology, but it's not the same way that most people look at astrology. It has its shortcomings, and it's slightly different because in the end of the day, we can change that. We're not affected that you therefore put your hands up and give up. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, probably do. When Saul had to go back with the King Saul, when the prophet died, Samuel, he died, and he had to go to war
with Amalek.
And then he usually went to the prophet, ask him what to do, get his piece of advice. But he was dead already. He went to Baalat oath. He went to
an idol.
How would you explain it?
I would say it was kind of like these types of naysayers or something like that. But what's the question? Yeah.
And when she gave him an answer because Shmuel came through.
Right. So what's the question though?
Question is, how does that
He was obviously looking for guidance in the wrong avenue, according to what we're saying
Yeah,
so
but
far.
you're not allowed to go to.
Well,
buy
right, but we
a-
haven't even touched that yet, but yeah.
Mm.
But just to come back to this, with this knowledge now, understanding how things, there is an inclination based on the time or window that you are born. Now you can understand why we wish people Mazel Tov, right? We were hoping that they were born under a good inclination, a good time that would help them, give them that extra boost in life. So if you'd like to read text number 7.
When a woman is giving birth, the people present in the house at the time should pray for mercy for the mother, and that the child be born into a positive astrological.
So really, we should answer Amen. If somebody was doing a Mazel Tov, you should answer Amen. Now, today, though, like we mentioned, it's now a congratulations. It's lost a lot of that. But in its true intent, it is like, hey, this should be in a good, auspicious time. Because that's going to help the baby, give it extra boost, or it could be the determining factor in kind of giving him a negative boost that he has to overcome. So there is very strong support from the Talmud. Now we're going to jump to other texts, and that is Maimonides. Does Maimonides give any validity to astrology? We already said that he had issues with it, but does he give, he was the one who kind of shared the questions about free choice, about reward and punishment. But what's his opinion about astrology? Clearly, we could say, if you looked at the Jewish text, there's plenty of text that gives validity to astrology. Text number 8.
On David. All philosophers consider everything the astrologers say to be false. I know that you may search in the teachings of our true sages in the Talmud, Mishnah, and Midrash to find teachings that appear to state the astrological configurations at the time of a person's birth determine certain matters. Don't be bothered by this. One doesn't depart from the settled law in favor of preliminary discussions. Similarly, one should not reject logical conclusions that have already been conclusively proven, and instead latch on to the teachings of an individual sage. It is possible that you are misunderstanding something. There may be a hidden meaning to this teaching, or it may have been stated in response to a specific need or contemporary event.
So there's, I'm just going to share, kind of recap what he said, and then I'm going to share something that I always find quite fascinating in what he just said. Number 1 is he said Talmudic passages that do talk about astrology, they're individual opinions. There's a lot of individual opinions, but that's not what he's addressing. And number 2 is he said maybe they're sharing it because of a non-literal or a hidden meaning, but he doesn't give examples of that. But there's something else that he shares that I actually find quite fascinating. He says that maybe one of the reasons was because everyone believed in astrology. And so the rabbi's job was more about guiding them rather than saying you're wrong. And so they took a kind of teaching that used astrology to keep everyone kind of on the straight and narrow for everything else, right? Their concern was that the tradition continues. And so they're not going to start fighting with people who believe in this, and then they're not going to listen to them for anything. So they kind of stuck in there and stayed in their lane. And they used some of the nuances and vernacular and teachings that others were very comfortable and it was common for them. But they didn't really believe in it. It's just an interesting idea. But at any rate, he codifies this into his book of law. And he uses a text from the Torah for this, text number 9, Marcy.
Marcy, what is the definition of fortune telling forbidden by the Torah? This refers to a person who tries to predict auspicious times by means of astrology, saying this day will be a good day, this day will be a bad day, it's appropriate to perform a particular task on a certain day, or this year or this month will not be opportune for this particular matter.
So he doesn't just say that astrology is foolish. He actually says it is forbidden. So the horoscope column, if any of you do read the newspaper, is like you can't use it for guidance. Practically, though, there are two different opinions that we've just shared. And so what do we do? It's a good question, right?
You do whatever you feel like.
So if you look at page 66, I just want to share, these are 4 texts. I'm not reading them, but just so you see that there are plenty of sages and Jewish rabbis of our history that disagreed with Maimonides, disagreed with the Rambam, and they follow like the Talmudic texts that say there is a validity to the astrology minus, the way we shared it in this class earlier. But the question is, yeah.
Kind of like last week with dreams. Take it or not.
Well, so I'll just share kind of what we're saying so far. Number one is it's not a predictor, right? We said it has uncertainty in their calculations, right? They had a haziness and interpretations aren't always correct. Number two, we can override it with mitzvot and prayer. So it would appear that it doesn't really have a predictive value for us. And that's why the Ramban, not to confuse between the previous author, which was Rambam with an M at the end, but the Ramban, who is known as Nachmanides, not Maimonides, he shares that text number 10. So, Linda, I think we're up to you. Page 68.
The meaning of the verse, be wholehearted with God, is that we should devote our hearts completely to God and trust that He alone controls everything. We should not inquire from astrologers or any other future tellers, nor should we trust that their predictions will be fulfilled. If we hear any prediction from them, we should assert that everything is in the hands of God, because He is omnipotent and can change the constellations of the heavens at will, negating all the predictions made by astrologers. We should believe that all future occurrences are determined by our service of God. I like this one. Okay, I was destined to read this one.
So if I could summarize this, I think it's a very interesting thing. He's not saying astrology is not true. He's saying there is something more true, and that is God and observing His commandments. And so put faith in God. That is what it means to walk and be wholehearted with God. And just to kind of share something very interesting about the story with Rabbi Akiva and his daughter on the wedding day, Rabbi Akiva didn't go to that person and ask him, what is the future? What is the future for my daughter? The guy told it to him. And so he took it seriously. He was worried, but he didn't go and seek it. And so in the end of the day, this is the view that is codified in the actual code of Jewish law, and that's text number 11, Leslie.
We do not make inquiries from astrologers.
So we're not saying why. It doesn't get into a conversation and a discussion because we believe it, we don't, just as we don't do that. Not because it is completely forbidden or not. It's just we don't do that. On a practical level, this is a book of practical law. And so in the end of the day, we shouldn't be pursuing it. But like we talked about, even if you did pursue it, you can override it. So it's very simple. Your destiny is not complete. Now, again, I'm not saying, because that would be very bad rabbinic advice, that if somebody is going through something so terrible, prayer is going to change it. But it does have that power, and sometimes God answers our prayers, and sometimes God doesn't. But it has that override opportunity. You want to ask something?
Yeah, do Sephardic and Ashkenazi look at this differently?
Okay, I like what you're asking. First of all, Maimonides was Sephardic.
Right.
Let's put that out there. I don't know what Nachmanides was, but I think that really your question touches next week when we talk about like the evil eye and I don't think that Judaism has a disagreement. It might be more who's more aware and worried about it. That might be it.
Definitely came from the Sephardic.
It came from the Jewish. The question is who's more worried. There isn't a different text. All of these texts are... So God can change destiny. That is really the key to transcending the nature, even the stars, is our faith in God. Master of the universe, and this world is God's. Now, with that, we're going to jump into text number 12, another author who talks, and rabbi who talks about the importance of faith, but in context of astrological destiny. And he was asked a question by his community. I don't have the question, but this is his reply. So text number 12, and so we'll go to you.
If we have firm faith in God regarding everything we do, he will transform the astrological destiny from bad to good.
So it's quite simple. We have the power. We got to tap into it. And so astrology is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe in it, it's going to happen. But if you want to change it, you have the means to change it. And that is through faith, mitzvot, study, prayer. Yeah, I don't know if you could change earthquakes, if I heard that. But what, so for a larger kind of viewpoint on this and an attitude about horoscopes and astrological inquiry, we'll turn to text number 13. This is a letter from the Rebbe. Lynn, you've got this one.
I duly received your letter in which you asked about the Jewish attitude to horoscopes, etc. Generally, astrology and the like play no part in Jewish life, as it is also written in the Holy Scriptures, of the signs in heaven you shall have no fear. Jeremiah 10. On the contrary, we have the commandment, thou shalt be wholehearted with God your God, which is also quoted in Shulchan Aruch. This means that the Jew has to have complete and wholehearted faith in God and in his benevolent providence, which extends to each and every one individually. As for taking an interest in horoscope, etc., purely as a curiosity and the like, as you mentioned, this would amount to a waste of interest which should be channeled in a more productive way. For it is explained in Hasidus that God has not given man an excess of capacities, nor a deficiency in them. In other words, every person, and especially a Jew, has been given a certain amount of capacities and powers of concentration, etc., all of which must be utilized in the fulfillment of his purpose and life on this earth, namely to live in accordance with the Torah and mitzvot, and to disseminate justice and righteousness, etc. It follows from the above that if a person should divert any of his capacities, thoughts, and concentration on a useless thing, even if it be harmless, it is nevertheless harmful in the sense that he would thereby create a deficiency in the area which is important and necessary for it.
So really, he's reiterating what we learned, which is that don't seek counsel from an astrologer or from astrology, but he doesn't say it's forbidden. But what he does touch, what? Yeah, that text. He kind of reiterated what we read, but here's one other thing that he talks about. Like many of us, you might not even seek counsel from it. You might just read it because it's entertainment. And if it's good, you'll have a better day. You'll play the lottery. If not, right? It's nice. Maybe there's something to it. Kind of what many people, I think, fall into that category. I think 60% at least, I would say, because 30% are pro. But he doesn't say it's forbidden either. He just gives advice not to do that. He says, spend your time somewhere else, right? It's a distraction from where you should be focused. And that is making this world a better place. You do that through the mitzvah, through study, through growth. You want to ask a question? Go for it.
You keep referring to he. Who's he?
Like in this, it depended which author. This one was the Rebbe's, before that was Nachmanides, before. Yeah, because I'm saying the author.
Oh, okay, so it's not like a general way of saying he.
I'm gonna start thinking more as I say he now.
Yeah.
And use a title of a rabbi. I don't want to confuse you. All right, we're talking about those that identify. No, good points. So just to kind of recap something, I think that a lot of this text has really been focused on astrology. But like we mentioned, if we looked at that original study, a lot of people don't believe in astrology. So There is something else though for the contemporary thinker. And that is, instead of maybe thinking about astrology, there's the scientific side that people also look at and say, this is kind of predetermined. In fact, science and many contemporary thinkers do not believe that we really have free choice because of our genetics, because of other, what was that?
The big one.
Yeah, so because of other aspects within our life that kind of predetermine human nature. And so really this can be also a practical conversation, not just about astrology, but on the more contemporary thinkers who astrology was never in their thought process, but genetics was. I know today with IVF treatments, you can choose gender, right? And if people had more options of hair color, they would do that too. So the fact is like we can kind of build that person to a degree within the lab, and we're talking about on a minuscule, but if people had the options of doing more, they would. So there is a new determinism, as we say, and that is going to be read in text 14. Did you have a question before that or after?
Well, wasn't in the web a scientific mind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As an engineer.
So if you in that state of mind, does it?
Oh, you're saying it might have, but this was an answer based on Jewish text. I understand what you're saying. Maybe his science knowledge is why he wrote an answer like that. It's a very good question. But he quoted Jewish sources. So all right. So text number 14. This is Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. You have a question on that?
I have a problem with all of this.
Okay.
Of this group over here is believing in astrology, stars, everything. Is that not worshiping another idol?
Well, so that was, so hold on. Time out. That's what the whole class was addressing,
Yeah.
right? If you have the belief that way, it's a problem. That was question number 1. And so our class is informing that if you still want to have an interest in what is the astrological sign for yourself, how can I marry it with Jewish belief? And so that's why we called it astrology minus. It's not exact. We believe that we can still change our destiny. We believe we do have free choice. So it's not a final verdict when the astrological sign says you're going to have a bad day or it's going to be a great day or whatever it is. That's really what we're addressing today. Regardless of where you came before today's class, now you have the power to look at it slightly differently. So it's a great question, right? Many people, Jewish people, believe it. And the question is, how can they? And so today we have more means of how we can look at that belief and also make it work with our Jewish beliefs. But it does mean you got to step down in how much regard you give for it and how much strength you give for it.
I believe in Saturn or Venus or something, and I'll take a statue and put it on my.
That would be idolatry. Yeah, that would be idolatry. All right, we're gonna jump. I'm gonna come back to that. I just want to make sure we finish kind of close to the time. Text number 14. So this is the New Age problem, and we will go to, I guess, Benita.
Free will is one of the fundamental beliefs of Judaism. Maimonides explains why. If we had no free will, there would be, he says, no point to the commands and prohibitions, since we would behave as if we were predestined to, regardless of what the law is. Nor would there be any justice and reward or punishment, since neither the righteous nor the wrongdoer is free to be other than what they are. So the problem is an ancient one, but it has become more salient in modern times because of the sheer accumulation of challenges to the belief in human freedom. Marx said history is formed by the play of economic forces. Freud argued we are what we are because of unconscious drives. Neo-Darwinians say that however we rationalize our behavior, we do what we do because people who behaved this way in the past survived to hand on their genes to future generations. Most recently, neuroscientists have shown using MRI scans that in some cases, our brain registers a decision up to 7 seconds before we are consciously aware of it.
So interestingly, we have astrologers of old and we have the new contemporary thinkers. They come to the same conclusion via different means. And so really what we're trying to say is same thing, that determinism, the new astrology, is all about genes, psychology, societal circumstances. What they were saying is it determines the future. We're saying the same exact conclusion is what we need to come to. And that is, it doesn't determine it. It influences it. In the end of the day, we have that power to overcome it because we have free choice given by God to make decisions, to ultimately bear responsibility for those decisions. And last text that we will highlight is that technically everything we have read and studied today was a perspective that says we are just a small little pawn in this huge cosmological system.
Yeah.
But the Hasidic text kind of flip that and say, really, the worldview that we just said is everything from above looks down below. We'll jump into text 15 for our final text. Izzy.
Hasidic elders related that Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi returned from his studies with Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mizrach. He expounded on the passage, "Know that which is above you." He interpreted to mean, "Know that which is above you depends on you." The spiritual worlds wait to hear a Jew discussing matters of Torah. The angels of heaven are waiting to hear us answer, Baruch Hu, Kedusha, and Amen. The earth that we step on has been waiting since creation for someone to walk on it and recite a chapter of Psalms or discuss a Torah matter with a colleague.
So don't wait for fate. The fact is, we are the center of the universe. We're really the stars, the moon, the sun. And the purpose of this world was created for us to make an impact here. And so what does it mean to be wholehearted with God, which was one of the texts that we had read earlier? It's really to abandon all of the astrological inquiry and rather realize that we have the ability with our free choice and our conduct to actually create the ultimate goal of everything, which is this world, to make it a better place. And we can control those strings. We can change our destiny and make this world more purposeful, more meaningful, and more divinely aware. And so just to use the screen for the recap video.
Lesson 2, Stars and Signs. 1. There is strong support in Jewish sources for the basic validity of astrology. But there are also those who completely reject it. 2. Any acceptance of astrology must come with several caveats in order to be compatible with fundamental Jewish beliefs. A. Astrology cannot determine moral behavior, only natural inclinations. B. Any predicted destiny can always be overturned by God, who reacts to our prayers and good deeds. And C. Astrology is fallible. 3. Even the Jewish authorities who granted astrology some validity caution us not to turn to it for information. We should place our faith wholly in God, who's always in full control and shapes our destinies based on our actions. 4. Rather than seeing ourselves as small pawns in an elaborate cosmological system, Chassidut teaches us that we are the center of the universe, and our actions shape its course.
All right, so thank you very much for joining. So